Kay. Now, Kay needs some introduction, right? Does she need an introduction to this audience? Kay? No, you don't. You know, she is kind of backbone of Clean Air Asia in Manila, and I think everybody, all of you know her, and she's very articulate, she's really good. Okay, Kay. I think with this.
Too much pressure. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm Kay Patdu, the Air Quality Program Manager for Clean Air Asia. Before I start, I also want to recognize the support of the team that have been involved in the past 2 years in developing this output. We have been graciously supported and guided also by ADB with VJ support, and we've had a lot of support as well from our partners from Hong Kong Polytechnic University, Professor Wing Tat Hong and Professor Frank Lee. May is here as well, and we've had colleagues who have been involved in this, Mylene Cayetano. And I also want to recognize Dieter, who has also supported us in reviewing the final output of the work. Yes, so I also want to acknowledge again ADB in their support in this work. So for the outline of presentation, I want to provide maybe I go back to the first slide. So the title is Improving Air Quality Monitoring in Asian Cities, a Good Practice Guidance. So we wanted to document the experiences that we have had, which we feel is very rich also from the experiences that we've had conducting the surveys and also interviews and visits in several cities. So I want to provide an overview of the output that we have developed, the process that we have undergone in finalizing the work, the structure, and the 5 characteristics that we wanted to focus on in this document. So I think we have printouts of the document provided outside and yesterday also at the Clean Air Asia booth. But when I looked at the coffee break yesterday, all of the documents are gone. But we have provided some copies outside in the desk as well. So why we wanted to work in this issue, this is definitely something highlighted in several of the presentations earlier today and also yesterday. Air pollution is a severe issue that we would like to work on and we need to work on. And the need to be able to understand the current status of air quality is very important, and this is very much linked to appropriate and effective monitoring systems. So the objective of the output that we have prepared is we want to be able to provide a good description of practices on air quality monitoring systems based on essential characteristics of a good system and build on the lessons that we have learned from experience within the region. The target audience is for technical staff and management of national and local governments and other institutions who already operate or who will potentially operate a monitoring system. We also want to use this as a basis to help policymakers determine effective mechanisms to finance monitoring systems. So I want to go back in terms of the process that we have undergone to be able to develop such a document. So we started off actually assessing air quality monitoring data of about 273 cities. Clean Air Asia's database, we have about 400, although we have set criteria in terms of the information that we will use for this work. After which, we have conducted a baseline survey of air quality monitoring systems in 69 cities across Asia. We reviewed several international guidelines on air quality monitoring and identified 5 key characteristics that we wanted to focus on in this regard. And we used this as a basis of assessing air quality management systems in Asian cities. The last component of this work is also related to potential twinning of cities who may be interested to learn more. And there was actually a pre-event on twinning activities which will be supported by ADB in the coming months and years as well. So each of the section discusses an essential characteristic for monitoring. First one is on planning and establishing a monitoring network based on monitoring objectives and is representative of the actual monitoring conditions. The second component for us is implementation of quality assurance and quality control procedures. Third component is on sustainable operation of the monitoring network. The fourth characteristic is on effective communication of information to the public. The final component is on communication of information to policy and decision makers. So each of the components include a section on international good practices and across either in the US or EU. And then we also include a status and challenges in Asia based on the results that we have gotten. And then afterwards, we highlight some case studies of potentially good practices within the region. So the intent of the document is not to replace very detailed international guidelines, which are already very much available, but we wanted to provide the snapshot of what is available and what could potentially be used within Asian cities. So allow me to go through each of the different components and what we have tried to cover. So for the first, on planning and establishing a monitoring network, we highlight here the importance of defining the purpose of the monitoring network, as this would definitely influence the type of pollutants to monitor, size of the network, location of monitoring systems, sampling duration, frequency, and of course resources that will be necessary to implement such a system. We also wanted to highlight the importance of periodically reviewing a monitoring network to ensure that they are still able to be, the monitoring network is still able to achieve the objective that has been set previously. So some of these results have already been highlighted by Professor Frank, but what is provided in detail in the document is information on number of stations, and we included the prescribed density primarily based on city population. Obviously, this may change depending on purpose, but we just wanted to provide an indicative number of stations primarily based on population. And we also included information on the pollutants that are currently monitored in Asian cities and have them relative to air quality standards, because obviously, as Judy has mentioned earlier, we want to create that link that when you establish standards, you also create the mechanism to monitor compliance to them. And then the final component we included is information on monitoring site in classification and their type.
Okay, it appears that you are still somewhere in the middle of the presentation. You don't have much time. So focus more on the recommendations.
Okay.
Okay, and try to finish still in 5 minutes. You have 5 minutes.
Okay. Yes. So the next component is on, in that case, there are some, because the discussions that will follow afterwards is more on low-cost monitoring and financing, which you wanted to focus on. So let me move into some of the other characteristics which may be interesting for you. So in terms of the sustainable operation of the monitoring network, one of the things we wanted to highlight here is the importance of continuous training for staff, and also provision of the financial requirements that would be necessary from the design of the monitoring network, setting up of the monitoring system, and also with the operation and maintenance of the monitoring network. We provided some indicative budgets that we have received information based on interviews that we have done and visits that we have done in the different cities. So I think one of the things we wanted to highlight as well are what are the various financial mechanisms that may be used to support air quality monitoring. So obviously there are government appropriated budget, grants and loans which may be available from international institutions. We also had some examples of tax generated subsidy, which we see in Delhi with the fuel tax used for the operation of the monitoring network. We also got some examples on proprietary innovative technologies, such as the Air de Paris balloon. But what we wanted to highlight is importance of potential role of private sector in operation and sustainability of the monitoring network, and also considering regional centers of excellence to support city government in operating and maintaining the network. One of the examples I wanted to highlight is from the case in the Philippines, Cebu City. There is a program called BAQ, which translates in local language, it means lungs. So what they wanted to do is that a group of pulmonologists purchased some equipment because Cebu City hospitals did not have sufficient equipment, the pulmonary unit, ventilators, or pulse oximeter. So what they tried to do is that they leased these equipment to different hospitals based on their need, and they built together services to be able to maintain the quality and control of these equipment. So possibly this is another thing that maybe we could consider for monitoring for cities which have limited capacity. So I think these information in terms of communication to the public, having them more concise, simple, and understandable. And we provided here an overview of the air quality indexes in Asia, whether they're currently being implemented or whether they have just been established. The last point on communicating to policymakers. This is definitely a very important part. I think this has been also highlighted during the clean air planning breakout session yesterday, that policymakers need to be involved as well, because we need the political will to be able to encourage action on the ground. So yes, so this is the link for the document. We would appreciate some comments. Actually, some of the information we also used in our guidance framework for better air quality in Asian cities, and we've already gotten some feedback on that as well, which we will also use to improve this document. So thank you very much.
Presenting the study, I will possibly take just 2 minutes here to see, not only when we visited these places, we found that there are technical inadequacy. In this report, we also provide you the costing. We are providing you actually that Hanoi, how much they spend yearly on air quality monitoring, what kind of equipments they have purchased, at what cost. Interestingly, similar equipments in Bangkok are at 1/3 of the cost. So, point I'm making, it's a rich document. You will possibly enjoy reading it. There are a lot of useful information in that. But importantly, what we are realizing that at the city level, it is extremely difficult. Maybe Delhi can afford or Beijing can afford, but what about Agra? What about some other, say, secondary level cities in Asia? And therefore, one idea I think which clearly Kay mentioned, that we want to discuss with you guys and get your feedback. Should we establish some regional centers? She referred some excellence centers, but fundamentally we mean that center which might be affiliated with the university or something like Asian Institute of Technology in Bangkok, something like that, where we provide through either ADB or other MDBs or through private sector or from the government resources, certain basic sets of equipments and people, okay, so that they can maintain those people, they can monitor air quality, and we see that the staff of pollution control boards or other government staff, how it can be integrated. But fundamentally, generally I think our observation was that technical staff is good sometimes, the medium level, but they are not at that level, where they can really make a difference and in the monitoring. So this will be one point of discussion, and therefore, I thought I will mention so with these words, and the cost also became very important, and therefore, possibly last one more point, and one after the speakers speak, we'll try to see that there's some way to reduce the cost of this? Can we do something? I mean, need we only rely on those automatic monitoring stations, which are very expensive, difficult to operate, possibly, because, we don't have really trained manpower to do that? Can we bring in something new on the technological side? And that is what the next two speakers are going to speak. May I now invite Tim Dye to mention about, on the low-cost monitoring Tim, I think Tim, can you just describe when you are, what you are doing? I mean,
Sure.
that would be great, yeah. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and to talk about a subject that I'm very passionate about and excited to work on for about the next 15 years of my career. I'm here with my colleague Alan Chan, and Alan and I have been working on this for a number of years along with other colleagues at our company, Sonoma Technology, and with US EPA and other colleagues in the US and around the world. What I want to talk about is really a paradigm shift. The first couple of speakers have talked about these high, very accurate, also very expensive monitors and stations that are set up here. Because they're very expensive, there are very few sites. These are absolutely needed for monitoring air quality, for air quality management. You need to have precise instruments that are accurate. One of the challenges too is that these can only be used by experts. And we just heard some of the issues and challenges with training. What's happening now, and I mean now, is these devices have been shrunk. Other devices are coming onto market that can measure pollutants. And I'll talk about those in a second. And what that means is now all of a sudden we have individuals that know nothing about air quality are now capable of monitoring air quality at a lower cost. It's less accurate in general. These are now mobile, they're no longer fixed, and they can be used by everybody. That's a big paradigm shift and a change in the way we think about air quality monitoring. And what I want to do during this talk is share with you 3 of the projects that we've done in a range of different applications and show you the potential for this technology. Before I begin, let me just provide a little bit of background. These devices range from really small to larger. In general, they can be held within your hand, okay, when we talk about low-cost air quality sensors. The low cost here can range from anything from about $100 up to $9,000. $9,000 is probably more mid-cost. Low cost is generally $100 to maybe $1,000, $1,500. There are many of these devices out there that can measure gases. So ozone, CO, NO2. There are many that can measure particles, not PM 2.5, but particles, just total particles. There are very few, and I've seen no sensors that can measure toxic air pollutants out there that are in this relatively low cost range. These are now fixed, as you can see by this unit right here, which is on a tripod measuring ozone. They're mobile, can be placed in a car, and they're also personal and can be worn on person. I'll show you an example of that in a minute. There are a number of components to consider when buying these is what sort of storage do they have, communications devices and displays. I realize some of you are probably looking at this and asking some questions. Well, how accurate are these? That's a question that I've asked for really the last 3 years, and I want to share with you some of the work that we've done. How reliable are they? Will they last? Will they operate this week, next week, a year from now? To answer some of these questions, we don't know. This is an emerging technology, and we're going to need to figure it out as an air quality community over the course of the next couple of years. How are we going to use this data? Who's going to use this data? And what are the methods for using the data? How do we interpret the data? A fixed site versus a mobile site. And this plot right here is showing some measurements that we made of PM 2.5, and there's a fixed station right in the center here. This is about a 5 by 5 kilometer grid, showing 3 hours, wintertime conditions. We have a reference station there, and you can see that there's tremendous gradients of PM 2.5, throughout that region, and very localized due to local combustion and wood burning. So we're going to have to figure out how do we interpret these different patterns, fixed versus mobile. I want to share with you 3 projects that we've done. The first one is to provide, similar to the previous talk, an assessment and provide a guidebook. And this guidebook, we wrote this for the EPA, that was under contract to the EPA. And the idea here was to provide some basics for air quality, information about air quality sensing, some performance recommendations, and how to use air sensors. And the reason we wrote this guidebook was there are many developers out there that are electrical engineers and don't know anything about air quality. And this was kind of a quick look guidebook to get them up to speed to monitor air quality and to figure out how they could develop sensors that actually worked and measured the right pollutants. For example, we had some individuals that were trying to measure ozone in the middle of an urban city where you'd typically expect ozone to be relatively low. That's not a concern. So EPA commissioned us and we worked with them to develop this guidebook, and that's out there. If people are interested in the links, I'll have them on the last slide. If you're interested in all the links, give me your card and I'm happy to send those to you. In the second study, this was to look at the regional characteristics and the gradients of ozone in the Central Valley of California. So here's the Western US, California. This is showing the reference ozone monitoring stations. In the southern portion of California, we have a 50 by 50 kilometer region. And the air agency there wanted to look at how variable is ozone across that region. And so we created this project, and the only way that we could run the project was to use relatively low-cost ozone sensors. And we wanted to put out 23 stations. There were 3 EPA reference stations there, and we put out 23 ozone sensor systems. This was new. This was over a year ago that we did this. And one of the key things that we had to do right from the beginning was figure out, do these sensors even work? And so we set a whole framework up to really figure that out. And that included an initial and final quality assurance where we co-located all 23 of these sensor systems next to an EPA reference station and compared the data in the beginning and then the end of the study. And the correlations here are about 0.99 for R squared and 0.96. Also during the study, we put 2 of these sensor systems on an existing EPA, or actually California Air Resources Board station, and monitored that continuously. And one of the things that we found over the course of this 6-week study is the ozone response started drifting. Okay, so out of the box, these sensors have issues and problems, along with probably any device that's out there. So it's really important to wrap a QA program, establish a QA program to ensure quality data. We completed the study, and this is just showing one day in particular, 2 hours at a time, showing ozone building up. And you can see that there are fairly sizable gradients down here in this, valley right here, where it's relatively lower and then it goes higher and so forth. We were only able to address this question and challenge with the low-cost monitors. Okay, if we had to put in reference stations, the program probably would have been over $1 million, and it was much, much less than that. Now I want to share with you the last project that we worked on, and we're going to go completely to the other end of the spectrum. We're going to talk about education, and kids' education in particular. This is a project that we've created called Kids Making Sense, and it's about kids and youth making sense of the environment around them. And our vision and goal is to deploy air sensors, and they look like this right here, and Alan's got one of them as well. But you can wear it right around your neck like that, measures particles, reports it real time on the cell phone. This is for real right now. And what we're seeking to do is deploy those in schools and make those available to school kids. Teach them about particles and then to go out and make measurements. Now, being air quality scientists, one of the questions we always ask is, well, how good is this device right here? Does it even work? And so we've done a number of studies where we've obtained a thermo personal datagram, or PDR, right here that measures PM 2.5. And then here are all these air beams running right here. We've run this for about 250 hours in a variety of different conditions, from very clean to extremely dirty. And you can see right here, this is showing ambient levels, outdoor concentrations. Green is the reference. And you can see that this air beam, this device right here, which is on the order of about $300 or so, actually tracks PM levels reasonably well. Does it replace a reference monitor? Absolutely not. But it does track particulate levels. Okay, so we found that encouraging. So one of the projects, the Kids Making Sense projects that we did was in New Taipei City, Taiwan. And it was a one-day workshop, and here's what we did. We went in and we talked to all the students about particle pollution, where are the sources, how do particles behave. They mapped out their air routes, and then each team, there were 5 teams, took this device and a cell phone, went out around the city, made measurements, they came back, and then we crowdsourced the measurements. And so we laid them out in the map like this. Each team got up and said, here's what we found. Particles were high over here, low over there. And it's a tremendous learning experience, not only for them, but also for kids like me and kids probably like you. So we have a couple of them. If you're interested and you want to try it out today, let me know. We can do that or tomorrow. But this is a great opportunity to really convey air quality monitoring in a simple way to people so they can understand it. And it could be to directors as well, or politicians, or anyone. I think this has huge potentials here in Asia. And there are a number of things. One is, I think there's a great opportunity to reduce exposure to pollutants. This device is telling me right now that
Tim,
particles, yeah.
You seem to be possibly almost near the end, but
Yep.
you have 1 more minute, please.
Sure, great. I can wrap up in that. So I think there are opportunities to reduce exposure. I think there are great opportunities to identify pollution sources, like these 2 students here in the subway in New York City measuring particles. Also locate hotspots. This is in Northern California, where we had mobile measurements. It was relatively clean on this street. 200 meters away, it was levels that you would see perhaps in Beijing on a dirty day. There are lots of hotspots out there. I think there are opportunities to supplement monitoring networks. So take the reference stations that are very expensive and then supplement it with some of these lower cost devices. And as I mentioned in our Kids Making Sense project, there are tremendous outreach and education opportunities. And then the last point I just wanted to comment on is there are opportunities to rethink about air quality. Indoor and outdoor air blurs together when you start wearing a device. This is me just working in my apartment, lighting a candle and blowing it out. And all of a sudden I had levels of particulate in my apartment that were unhealthy. That's an understanding. Now all of a sudden, the amount of data that these devices produce is 3,000 times what we're used to. And so there's some challenges there as well. We tweet at @SonomaTech_tech and also Tim S. Dye, and we post a lot of our information, reports, and likewise on that website. So thank you.
Tim, thank you very much for this presentation, which provides a completely different perspective, what we can actually do monitoring with monitoring devices. Now, you said that we should contact you or, you interact with you. Actually, I extend you an invitation right now, and we will fund your travel also, to come to Manila whenever you think appropriate. We have time, and maybe March and April are good month for ADB, because we then are set in the new year and we start thinking. We do some green bag seminars where some advances in any area of interest in environment, we invite speakers. So I invite you for that. We will hold a seminar and we would like you to make these presentations, show the devices so our colleagues understand actually what is happening. Thanks. Now I think, well, Liam is there. Liam actually owns a company which is working on developing low-cost devices. And so I'm extremely pleased to have actually Tim and Liam in this discussion. And without further ado, I'll request Liam to, just let us know what is actually happening.
Thank you very much. Yes, so my name is Liam Bates. I come from Switzerland originally. You have to excuse me, I have a little bit of a cold. I also didn't sleep very much last night. I got off the plane here about 5 hours ago. And I actually thought that was really interesting, that the photo with the 2 people testing the air outlet. We actually did a very similar thing in Beijing, where we had a bunch of people running around the subway system in Beijing with these sensors. And it's funny because maybe a lot of you know, often pollution levels, PM levels in the subways are much higher than outside. But of course in Beijing you see people running around with masks on all the time. They get in the subway and they go, which is perhaps the opposite of what you should be doing. So it's really interesting when you sort of start learning about all this. So this is my home. Yes, this is where I live right now. So I live in Beijing. I've been based in Beijing for about 10 years. Yes. I do enjoy it other than the air, which is why for the past couple years I've been spending a lot of time trying to research air, particularly in Beijing, what we can do to fix some of the problems, especially on a personal level, because it's maybe a little above most of us to fix a problem outside. So we're actually quite this is an interesting statistic I just thought I'd put out there quickly, is that according to WHO standards, out of the 500 million people living in urban settings in China, only 1% breathe clean air. Yeah, it's insane. Luckily though, we have a lot of information about this. This is actually a shot of my phone. You can see every single app on this page is about measuring or keeping track of air quality. And so a lot of these apps, you open them up and it's getting data from these government-funded monitoring stations around. This one is Beijing. And as you can see, we're actually very lucky in China because there's a huge number. I mean, that's a lot of stations for Beijing. In all of China, this app sources from 1,354 different stations. Not all of those are measuring PM 2.5, but a large number of them are, in 255 cities, I think, across the country. So we actually have a lot of information. The problem, of course, is that this costs a lot of money. In 2012, I think Beijing spent 59 million RMB, it's about almost $10 million on equipment. I mean, this is a huge amount of money to know more about the air. Yeah, these guys. So these are all across Beijing, all across China. As you can see from this map as well, I actually took this last night just because I was so shocked. These are PM 2.5 levels. In the bottom left corner, we have 570 micrograms per cubic meter. Yeah, that was like 12 hours ago. The blue blinking dot is, of course, where I am at the airport waiting to get on my flight. And we've got 280. So you can see from this, you can't say, well, just put one machine in the city and that's that. It's not going to work. You need to have these all over the place to get any real useful information out. Problem is, it costs too much. Well, we just learned a lot about these low-cost solutions, most of these based on optical systems, scattering of light. These range, we also just heard, from low cost, $100, to still not that low, $9,000, $10,000. It's still quite expensive. Just briefly, the way some of these things work, in some of them you have a laser, or you might have infrared or other sources sending out light. Particles get in the way of the light. The light refracts through the particles. It's scattered onto sensors, which from that you can sort of correlate out and find what the particle levels are. So there's been a lot of interesting tests done in Beijing. This is essentially something which allows you to measure air quality and send it off to the internet for about $375. That's an American particle counter. It's called Delos. I think it's about $100 and something by itself. In China, it's substantially more. With some other equipment and maybe a little bit of a background in electrical engineering, you can now send a lot of this information in real time to the internet and compare it live to the feeds that we get from the government stations. And that's what this is. So the blue dots there are the numbers that we're getting from this Delos. And the red curve is the government monitoring station. There's an incredible difference in cost here, but you can see the lines are not too far off. There's a few dots missing. This is when the internet connection went down. And this has been going on for about a year. It's pretty close. And considering that for one of these machines, in the case of Beijing, if they, instead of adding 2 extra sort of BAM stations, they got 1,000 small sensors, that could be extremely valuable. On every street corner, you could have a sensor telling you in real time, down to the second, what is going on, rather than this sort of 1.5 hours later saying, oh, this general portion of the city has problems. In many Asian cities, of course, this could be an interesting interim solution, sort of lower cost alternative. Of course, these big stations, as you mentioned, are still extremely valuable. They're still very necessary, but this can provide a lot of very interesting sort of other information. I thought I would just show this. This is kind of interesting. Maybe some of you have seen it. This is in the US, basically an independent monitoring station, which has the same thing, low quality sensor, not low quality, low cost, high quality sensors inside, running off of solar panels, which are on top, measuring all sorts of different information, sending it up to a database on the internet, and then from there, sort of an open access platform where you could get this information and people can learn more about the environment they're in. So you could go to this bench here and sort of learn more about the environment that you're in right now. And I think it's a fascinating way to make people learn more about the environment around them, how clean air affects them. So I'll just finish up with that. A lot of information was already gone over just now, but I think there's a huge potential in the whole world, and especially in Asia, to combine these high quality monitoring stations with, sorry about that, lower cost alternatives to get more information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leanne, for this very eye-opener kind of presentation.